can you actually describe the Sphinx and the Great Pyramids and what you find most mysterious and interesting about them?
Well, the Great Pyramid contains a number of mysteries. The Great Pyramid, first of all, is very big. The Great Pyramid weighs...
Graham Hancock has long been the voice of lost civilizations and hidden histories. Mainstream archaeology differs in opinion. But what if artificial intelligence starts backing up his claim? This is a moment worth freezing. Today, we'll unveil the true story behind the rumors of how Grok AI revealed who built the pyramids and Graham Hancock's version of the story. Graham Hancock's claims about pyramids. In 1995, Graham Hancock released Fingerprints of the Gods, a book that would go on to sell millions of copies and reshape how a generation looked at ancient history. Hancock trained as a journalist, working for outlets like The Economist before pivoting into historical writing. But what made his work explosive was not his credentials. It was the claim that everything we think we know about early civilization might be incomplete. His argument takes us back to 10,000 BCE. This aligns with the end of the last ice age, a period marked by dramatic climate shifts, melting glaciers, and rising sea levels. Hancock argues that before this upheaval, a global advanced civilization existed, one capable of astronomy, engineering, and large-scale construction. Then something happened, a catastrophe, possibly linked to events like the Younger Dryas cooling period around 10,800 to 9,600 BCE wiped it out. According to Hancock, the survivors carried fragments of knowledge forward, seeding later civilizations, including ancient Egypt. They, according to Hancock, were the architects of the pyramids. Hancock suggests that when dynastic Egyptians began building around 2600 BCE, they were not starting from scratch. Instead, they were rediscovering or replicating techniques passed down from a lost source. He then turns to the sky, specifically to Orion. The three main pyramids on the Giza Plateau appear to mirror the three stars of Orion's belt, Al-Nitak, Al-Nalam, and Mintaka. This correlation, popularized alongside author Robert Bauval, is presented as intentional. Hancock argues that this alignment encodes astronomical knowledge, linking the pyramids to the ancient Egyptian belief in the afterlife and the god Osiris, associated with Orion. The Giza complex, in this interpretation, becomes not just a burial site, but a cosmic map aligning Earth with the heavens. Hancock maintains that the correlation is too close to dismiss, suggesting a deliberate design rooted in advanced astronomical observation. He frequently references Robert M. Schoch, who studied erosion patterns on the Great Sphinx of Giza. Schoch observed vertical weathering on the Sphinx enclosure walls, patterns he interpreted as consistent with prolonged rainfall, not wind and sand. This matters because Egypt has been largely arid for the past 5,000 years. Significant rainfall of the kind suggested would date the erosion to a much earlier period, possibly 7,000 to 9,000 BCE. If correct, this would push the Sphinx, and by extension the Giza site, thousands of years older than the accepted date of around 2,500 BCE. This is the hinge of Hancock's argument. If even one major monument at Giza predates dynastic Egypt, then the entire historical framework shifts. The pyramids might still be younger, but the site itself becomes a relic of a deeper past. Hancock uses this possibility to suggest that Egypt inherited not just ideas, but sacred geography, building atop a landscape already imbued with meaning and possibly shaped by earlier hands. He strengthens this with mythology. Across cultures, from Mesopotamia to Mesoamerica, there are stories of floods, destruction, and lost golden ages. Hancock treats these not as isolated myths, but as fragmented memories of a real global catastrophe. He draws parallels between these narratives and geological evidence of rising sea levels after the Ice Age, submerging vast coastal areas where early civilizations existed. If such societies were indeed coastal, as Hancock claims, then their remains would now lie underwater, beyond easy archaeological reach. But mainstream archaeology presents a very different picture, the reality of the Great Pyramid. Mainstream archaeologists claim that the Great Pyramid of Giza was completed around 2580 to 2560 BCE during the reign of Khufu, and even now, stripped of its polished outer casing, it dominates the horizon. Originally, it stood at 146.6 meters, a height unmatched by any human structure for nearly 4 millennia, until medieval cathedrals in Europe finally overtook it. Today, erosion and the loss of casing stones have reduced it to about 138.8 meters, but the scale remains disorienting. Stand at its base and the numbers stop feeling abstract. Each side stretches roughly 230.4 meters, forming a near-perfect square. Multiply that across 4 sides, rising at a precise angle, and you begin to grasp the mass, approximately 6 million tons of stone. The pyramid is composed of an estimated 2.3 million blocks, each averaging 2.5 tons, though many are smaller, and some, particularly the granite beams deep inside, reach staggering weights of 60 to 80 tons. Modern surveys show the pyramid's sides are aligned to true north with an error of about 3 arc minutes. The ground beneath it is no less exacting. The base of the pyramid is leveled to within approximately 2 centimeters across the entire 230-meter span. Any deviation would compound as the structure rose, yet the foundation holds, flat and stable, supporting millions of tons without measurable tilt even after 4,500 years. Then there are the casing stones, the outer layer that once covered the pyramid in smooth, white limestone from Tura. Most of these stones were removed in later centuries, reused in buildings across Cairo, but fragments remain. Where they survive, the joints between them are astonishingly tight, sometimes less than 1 millimeter wide. This is not uniform across the entire structure. The inner core blocks are rougher, irregular, and fitted with far less precision, but the outer shell, the visible face, was engineered to a standard that transformed the pyramid into a reflective surface, catching sunlight and glowing across the desert. Inside, narrow passages angle upward and downward, leading to chambers placed with deliberate symmetry. The king's chamber, constructed from massive granite blocks, sits near the center of the structure. Above the king's chamber, a series of relieving chambers distributes the immense weight pressing down from above. These chambers contain beams weighing up to 80 tons, transported from Aswan over 800 kilometers away. The logistics alone are staggering, quarrying granite with stone tools, moving it along the Nile, hauling it up the plateau, and positioning it with precision deep within a rising structure. Ancient sources, including accounts attributed to Herodotus, suggest a building period of around 20 years. If taken at face value, this implies an average placement rate of roughly 300 blocks per day, every day, for 2 decades. And according to archaeologists, those workers were not mythical. Excavations in the 1990s and 2000s, led by Mark Lehner and Zahi Hawass, uncovered the workers' settlement of Hayt el Gorab, just south of the pyramids. What emerged was not a trace of a lost Ice Age civilization, but a fully functioning Old Kingdom industrial community. Long barracks housing rotating crews, bakeries capable of producing thousands of loaves daily, and large-scale food remains indicating regular consumption of cattle and sheep. Radiocarbon dating and material culture firmly place this settlement around 2600 BCE, aligning directly with the reigns of Khufu and his successors. Nearby tombs of laborers contained skeletal evidence of healed fractures, suggesting organized medical care. The contradiction sharpened further in 2013 at Wadi al-Jarf, where archaeologists discovered papyri written by Mera, documents Hancock could not have referenced when he published in 1995. These records describe, in operational detail, the transport of fine limestone from Tura to Giza for the construction of Akhet Khufu, the Great Pyramid. They log days, routes, crew movements, and deliveries, forming the earliest known logistical account of pyramid building. But let's assume that the mainstream is right. So how actually did they do it? Even in today's time, the feat seems impossible. How did they do it? The answer does not begin with lifting blocks. It begins with organization. Under Khufu, the Egyptian state mobilized tens of thousands of people, resources from across the Nile Valley, and a level of coordination that turned the impossible into routine. The first clues are hidden where no one was meant to look. Inside the relieving chambers above the king's chamber, quarry marks and graffiti survive, painted quickly, practically in red ochre. Crew names like Friends of Khufu appear, alongside construction notations. stones. These are not ceremonial inscriptions. They are the fingerprints of the workforce itself, marking which teams handled which stones. They confirm that the pyramid was not built by unknown hands, but by organized labor groups operating under a central authority. Then, far from Giza, the story picks up again. At Wadi al-Jarf, papyri dating to around 2600 BCE record the daily operations of a man named Mera. Back at Giza, the settlement of Hayt el-Ghurab stretches across the plateau, its remains outlining barracks, bakeries, breweries, and storage facilities. The workforce itself was structured. Estimates suggest 20,000 to 30,000 workers, divided into rotating crews. Farmers worked during the Nile flood season when their fields were submerged and agricultural labor paused. Skilled specialists, such as stonemasons, surveyors, and engineers, remained year-round. This rotation allowed Egypt to sustain construction over decades without collapsing its agricultural base. It also explains how such a massive labor force could be maintained without slavery on the scale once imagined. The process began in the quarries. Most of the pyramid's limestone came directly from the Giza plateau, cut from the bedrock itself. For finer outer casing stones, workers traveled to Tura, east of the Nile, extracting high-quality white limestone. Granite, used in the internal chambers, came from Aswan, over 800 kilometers to the south. Quarrying was done using copper chisels, stone hammers made of dolerite, and wooden wedges. Workers would cut channels around blocks, then lever them free, sometimes using water-soaked wood to expand cracks. Once cut, the problem became movement. Tomb depictions show massive statues being dragged on sledges, with workers pouring water onto the sand in front. Modern experiments have confirmed this technique. Wet sand reduces friction significantly, allowing heavy loads to be pulled more efficiently. Scale that up, and teams of workers could move multi-ton blocks across prepared paths. For long distances, the Nile carried the weight, boats loaded with stone during flood seasons, when water levels made transport easier and closer to the construction site. Arrival at Giza was only the midpoint. The real challenge was elevation. How do you lift millions of tons of stone to heights exceeding 100 meters without cranes? Ramps, however, their exact design remains debated. Straight ramps would require enormous volumes of material, possibly rivaling the pyramid itself. Zigzagging ramps, built along the sides, reduce the volume but complicate logistics. Internal ramp theories suggest corridors within the structure used during construction. No single model explains everything. At the final stages, when ramps could no longer reach the apex, smaller-scale techniques took over. Levering systems such as wooden beams used to lift stones incrementally allowed precise placement. Workers could raise a block slightly, insert supports, and repeat the process until it reached the desired height. This method, though slow, requires no advanced machinery, only coordination, timing, and control. The tools themselves were simple, but their use was not. Copper chisels dull quickly, especially against harder stone, but when combined with sand as an abrasive, they become effective cutting instruments. Dolerite pounding stones, which are harder than limestone, were used to break and shape blocks. This was repetitive, physical, and time-intensive, but with thousands of workers operating simultaneously across quarries, transport routes, and construction zones, the cumulative output becomes enormous. Time is the final constraint. Ancient accounts, including those attributed to Herodotus, suggest a construction period of about 20 years. To meet this timeline, the operation would need to place an average of 300 blocks per day. That figure sounds extreme, but it averages across all phases. Lower levels, with easier access and larger teams, would progress faster. Upper levels, requiring more precision and effort, would slow down. The key is parallelism. Multiple processes happening at once. Even the end of the process reveals planning. The smooth casing stones were likely placed from top to bottom, with ramps dismantled as the structure was completed. The result was a polished surface, reflecting sunlight, visible for miles. What remains today is the core, stripped of its outer shell, but the underlying system can still be traced. And then there are the people themselves. The tombs of workers near the pyramid tell a quieter story. Some skeletons show healed fractures, evidence that injuries were treated, not ignored. These were not expendable laborers. They were part of a system that invested in their survival because their work was essential. The pyramid was not built by force alone. It was built through coordination coordination, specialization, and continuity. So how did they do it? Not with lost technology, not with unknown forces. They did it with a network. Quarries feeding transport routes, transport feeding construction, construction guided by measurement, all sustained by a state capable of organizing resources across hundreds of kilometers. Each block placed was not an isolated act, but still, it feels improbable. No, there has to be something missing here. What about the precision factor that Hancock uses in his arguments? But wait, is it even possible? The pyramid's alignment to true north sounds like modern precision, but the night sky over ancient Egypt offered a fixed reference point: the circumpolar stars, those that never set, rotating endlessly around the celestial pole. Egyptian surveyors could track pairs of these stars as they crossed the meridian, using simple sighting tools and repeated observations to establish true north. This is not speculation. Experimental archaeologists have replicated these methods, achieving alignment errors comparable to the pyramids. No compass, no electronics, just patience, geometry, and the sky. Then comes the stone itself. Stories of impossible precision often focus on the tight joints between blocks, gaps so fine that a blade cannot pass through. But this precision is not universal. It is concentrated in the outer casing stones, the visible skin of the pyramid that once gleamed white under the sun. These stones were cut and fitted with extraordinary care. Beneath them, the core tells a different story: irregular blocks, varying sizes, dual gaps filled with mortar. The structure is not uniformly perfect. The mathematics comes next, claims that the pyramid encodes constants like pi or the golden ratio sound compelling, especially when ratios appear to align within fractions of a percent. But there is a problem. No Egyptian text from the Old Kingdom mentions these constants. What we do have is the Seked system, a way of describing slope using horizontal run per vertical rise. This system naturally produces proportions that can approximate familiar ratios when translated into modern mathematics. Harder to dismiss are the granite blocks. Deep inside the pyramid, in the king's chamber, are beams weighing up to 80 tons, carved from granite quarried in Aswan. Granite is not limestone. It contains quartz, making it significantly harder, around 6 to 7 on the Mohs scale. Copper tools alone cannot cut it efficiently, but copper was not used alone. Sand, rich in quartz, acted as an abrasive. Combined with sawing and drilling techniques, it could grind through granite over time. Experiments have demonstrated this, slowly, laboriously, but effectively. Some tool marks remain debated, particularly those suggesting high cutting speeds, but no confirmed evidence of advanced or non-ancient tools has been found. Then there's the Great Sphinx of Giza, which sits nearby. Some researchers, notably geologist Robert M. Schoch, have argued that the erosion patterns on its enclosure walls indicate prolonged rainfall, conditions that would date the monument to 7000 to 9000 BCE, long before dynastic Egypt. It is a striking claim, but it is not the consensus. Most geologists attribute the erosion to a combination of wind, salt crystallization, and localized water effects, consistent with the known climate of the region over the past several thousand years. The mainstream date remains around 2500 BCE, tied to the reign of Khafra. What often gets overlooked is the timeline leading up to Giza. The Great Pyramid did not appear fully formed out of nowhere. It is the result of a sequence. The Step Pyramid of Djoser, built around 2670 BCE, represents an early attempt, with stacked layers rising in stages. Then come the pyramids of Sneferu, the Bent Pyramid, with its sudden change in angle, and the Red Pyramid, the first true smooth-sided pyramid. These structures show experimentation, correction, and learning. By the time Khufu's project began, Egyptian builders had decades of experience. But what about Grok AI? Grok and the hidden truth narrative. Grok, developed by XAI, is presented as something different, an intelligence unburdened by bias, fed every dataset, every scan, every measurement of the pyramids. In viral narratives, Grok is said to have cut through decades of archaeology to expose a hidden truth about who really built the pyramids. The claim is dramatic. It is also unsupported, because when you step away from the script and look for evidence, there is nothing there. No published paper, no dataset release, no technical report, no collaboration with institutions like UNESCO or any major archaeological body. Grok has not produced peer-reviewed findings findings on the pyramids. It has not accessed secret archives or undisclosed scans. There is no verified record of it conducting original archaeological research at all. The narrative exists entirely in videos, posts, and retellings. What Grok actually is matters here. Like other large language models, it generates responses based on patterns in data, not on independent verification. It does not test hypotheses in the field. It does not run controlled experiments. It predicts what text should come next based on probabilities. That means it can assemble real facts and weave them together with speculative ideas into something that feels coherent. But coherence is not evidence. This is where hallucination enters. In AI terms, a hallucination is a byproduct of how the system works. When asked to explain mysteries, it can fill gaps with plausible-sounding conclusions, even when no data supports them. It can blend established archaeology with fringe theories, such as lost civilizations, advanced technologies, and suppressed knowledge, and present them in the same tone. The result is a narrative that feels authoritative because it is fluent, not because it is verified, and the structure of the claim itself amplifies the illusion. It starts with real data, the precision of the pyramid, the scale of construction, the alignment to true north. It then introduces unresolved details. Meanwhile, the underlying facts remain unchanged. The hidden truth dissolves under examination. The claims about AI revelation simply do not meet the standard of evidence. Sorry, Hancock. Well, that's it for now. Thanks for watching. Did you like this video? If you did, please consider liking, dropping a comment, and hitting the subscribe button so that you don't miss out on our new uploads. Also, don't miss this video you see on your screen right now. It's truly unbelievable.